Hello, and welcome to Two Pews in a Pod. Join us as we explore faith in a modern world at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Now, here is your host, Pastor Paul Baglios.
I'm Paul Baglios.
And I'm Megan Wyatt.
Welcome to this 5th episode in a planned 8 episodes in a series on the topic Faith and Vocation. And today, Megan and I are joined by 2 members of Evangelical Lutheran Church here in Frederick, Maryland, for the topic Faith and the Vocation of First Responders. And we're going to begin by asking Fred and Bob to describe what they have done, what they do, connected to that very important work.
I'm Bob Jacobs, and my involvement with the Fire and Rescue Service started back when I was just a young kid. A relative on my father's side of the family was a career firefighter here in Frederick City, and it just got my attention. And when I became of age, I joined the fire department. And since then, I've gone through many aspects of the service over the years. I started in 1963 and held many offices in the city fire service. And in 1989, the city of Frederick disbanded its fire service and turned everything over to Frederick County, and then it became a combined service in a sense. At that time, there were 21 employees within the Frederick City system. Today, there's over 450 involved across the whole county. Like I said, it's a combination system, meaning that you have volunteers and you have career people as well. It's an interesting concept in a sense, because most of the fire service throughout Frederick County are volunteer stations, meaning that every department, other than I think there's 3 or 4 stations, that are all owned and operated in a sense by the volunteer corporations across the county. My involvement again has been serving as many offices, treasurer, president. I had the opportunity in 2004, 2005 to serve as president of the Maryland State Firemen's Association. And that was quite an experience to be able to not only work with the many folks across the state, but have the opportunity to visit the different communities in the state of Maryland. And it's really interesting to have that experience, because every little community has a little bit something different. Because if you look at the state of Maryland, we have everything from the ocean to the mountains to our west, and it's a very interesting concept to deal with people on the Eastern Shore, people in Southern Maryland, and never get that confused. Eastern Shore and Southern Maryland are 2 different areas of the state. And then you have the metro, the central and western part of the state. So it's been an enjoyable experience. The main thing that I have always looked at from the very beginning, yes, we're individuals, and yes, we go out and help individuals that are in need of whatever service that may be. Sometimes it's emergency type service, and other times it's just something, something simple, a cat in a tree.
Does that really happen?
Yes, it does happen. So you basically are community oriented, and you're there to serve the community in whatever capacity that may be. Sometimes you meet people on their worst day, and other times it's a moment that is just glorious when you save that cat in the tree, But it's been a great career in a sense, even though it's mostly volunteer. It still provides a service in the form of community service. And that pretty much sums it up.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
I think the first time I met you, you had a cap on with the State Association insignia, and that we talked about that.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fred.
Yes. I am Fred Von Briesen. I'm a retired police sergeant for the Howard County Police Department. I served with them for 29 years. 18 of those years I was in the traffic enforcement section, and we were responsible for traffic enforcement and fatal collision investigation. My last 10 years with the department, I was a sergeant in charge of that section. I retired in January of 2010, went back to work about 6 months later as a civilian supervisor for Howard County, and I supervised the school zone speed camera program until I retired again this past March.
How's this retirement going?
It's better than the first time. My first retirement, in the first 2 weeks, we had 2 blizzards, and I ended up with food poisoning. So I decided that was a bad omen, that I needed to go back to work, so I went back to work.
So we're hoping it sticks this time.
This time it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, when we were talking a bit before we sat down to record this episode, I said I wanted to start with a story. I may have told you this story, Bob. My father was a firefighter for the city of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And on one occasion, I don't remember what else we might have been talking about, but I made a comment to him about the holiness of his work. And he looked at me puzzled and said, "What do you mean?" Which was a question he often asked me. And I reminded him of a story he had told after a particularly hard shift. There was a city worker with the power department who had climbed a power pole because a transformer at the top of the pole had blown. And he had gone up to do repair work. And at the top of the pole, he had gotten horribly burned with a surge of power. He was not yet dead, but injured to the point that he was immobile. Still conscious, but immobile. And fire department was called to the scene, and my father ended up being the one responsible to climb the pole, and I think he was lifted in the ladder, but to disengage this burned worker from the transformer and the wiring, hold him on his shoulders and get him back down to the ground. Sadly, he later died, but he was still conscious as my father was carrying him down, and the man was saying to him, "Thank you, thank you." And my father said through tear-filled eyes that he had tear-filled eyes as he was able to get that man to the ground. And I reminded my dad of that story, and I said, you firefighters, police officers, I think those who serve in our military and in other kinds of capacities, take on the commitment to step in harm's way on behalf of others. No matter how well trained you may be, there's always great physical risk to the work that first responders do, and yet you do it on behalf of others. You talked about a commitment to community. And especially, Fred, I imagine, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit previously with traffic accidents. I imagine you've seen some pretty ugly and heart-wrenching things and have often been, as Bob put it, beside people on what might be the worst day of their lives.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, as the two of you think about the experiences that you have had, if you thought about ways in which perhaps your faith has given you the courage and the encouragement to step into harm's way, to be beside others who are doing that in order to save life, to protect life, to rescue life, whether that has ever been part of how you've reflected on your work or stepped into it.
You want to go first?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, you have to consider whatever the situation is, and if it's an automobile accident, if it's a water rescue, if it's a structural fire, you have to be in a position to console family members. It's not easy. Sometimes it's very, very trying on first responders. As you mentioned, you see things and you deal with things that are not necessarily very pretty. And you have to be in a position, and I've always told the younger generation, including my sons and grandsons that are involved in the fire and rescue, that do not dwell on the incident. If you do, then it's time to get out of it, because it will take you down. Remember what you saw. Remember what you did. Remember all the parts of it. But if there's a fatality, do not dwell on it, because you are only doing what you've been trained to do. And in most cases, this may be a term that some people don't understand, but in most cases, when the bells go off and the sirens respond, that incident's already taken place. You are arriving after the fact in most cases, and you just have to deal with whatever you're being presented and deal with it in a professional way and then according to what's available to you to help an individual or multiple individuals, whatever it is as far as what you have responded to.
I always felt early on that as a Howard County police officer, I was probably one of the most highly trained individuals in police work. So my first 7 or 8 years in the department, I was handling routine calls for service like every other officer working, a section or a beat. And I always thought in the back of my mind, whatever comes up, I've been trained to handle it, and I'm going to handle what I'm faced and just go forward from there. Transitioning to collision investigation and traffic enforcement, for 18 years I was in a specialized section, and we were removed from having to handle routine everyday calls. So my exposure to danger was a lot different than my last 18 years than it was my first 7 or so years. So my training changed and my approach to things changed. I knew that when we were dispatched to a fatal collision, this is what I needed to do. This is what I was going to be faced with, and I needed to take each investigation step by step by step to go from the beginning to the end, and base everything on how I was trained and what I see when I get there. And I still remember, I have vivid memories of a number of the fatal collisions I went on. I remember my first fatal collision. I remember a fatal collision involving 4 deaths. I remember 3 collisions that involved police officers. So, I still remember year after year, there's plenty of collisions that still stick in the back of your mind that come out when you talk to people about police work and collision investigation.
I'm just still lingering with that, the idea of and the lens that puts in our lives of when you meet people, right? That it's the worst day. It could be their worst day. And I just think that's a beautiful lens that you would approach those situations, and knowing that people are not going to be at their best. I think so often we are expecting other people to kind of perform for us or, get over themselves. But in these situations, you're seeing people on their absolute worst days, and to trust your training to know how to move forward with that. Mm-hmm. It's really impressive. Yeah.
You do. And, everyone wants to know the why. And for the most part, they want to know the why right away. Yeah. A lot of times that why, how we went from point A to point B, takes a couple of weeks or a couple of months to finally figure out what happened, and then, what the result was.
Mm-hmm. Or like Bob was saying, if you get too wrapped up in trying to figure out why, the whys and the whos, then that also makes it difficult for you to continue to do your job, because you're that dwelling on things that are beyond your control and beyond your responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And you have a cross situation, because you can be dealing not only on the fire and rescue side, but in conjunction with the police agencies as well.
Right.
Because a lot of times it requires the intervention of police to assist when you have a situation that can easily get out of hand.
Yeah.
You describing, Bob, that when the bells ring and the sirens go, the incident has already happened. And I think of the work that the two of you and colleagues over the years have done, help on the way. Mm-hmm. And my comment to my father many years ago about the holiness of his work, listening to the two of you, I think of the same thing. Help on the way. And it doesn't matter whether people are experiencing or perceiving any of these things in religious terms, but I believe that what is unfolding, in fact, is part of God's immediate response to the crisis and the suffering and the turmoil of people is help on the way. And the two of you have spent your lives in being those embodiments of God.
You're correct. I mean, it only takes minutes in most cases. There's a pretty firm rule that most stations can respond within 5 minutes or less. And sometimes it's a critical timeline to get there, but get there in a safe manner at the same time, so that your assistance can be utilized to take care of whatever the situation may be, whether it's an automobile accident, whether it's a fire. It's all within a certain amount of time that can judge the outcome. Mm-hmm.
You started to say
something.
I
mean, again, the advantage I had for 18 years was we were in a reactive mode. Yeah. That by the time I'm called to go investigate the collision, the fire department's there, the first responding police officers are there, we would get called sometimes within 3 or 4 minutes of the first responding officer to arrive because of what they saw on the scene.
Yeah.
So we were there pretty quickly, but, and my duty going to the collision was to make sure that the scene was secured. And once we got there, we'd work with the fire department. They have a responsibility different than ours, but you have to work together to get to a resolution where at some point they're going to leave and we're going to take over. So, you look at, from my standpoint, it's a reactive, not necessarily a proactive approach to being the first one there.
One of the things that I have so appreciated as I've gotten to know both of you, and it may just be your own unique personalities, but it may also be an aspect of your training and your experience. Both of you are people of steady, calm strength.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I've never seen either of you in a situation where you've been rattled, you've lost your minds, and you have brought steady, calm strength to engagements here, and I've appreciated that greatly. And I've appreciated the time for this conversation. My admiration for both of you has increased in these past 20 minutes or so. Megan and I are both grateful that you've made the time to be here to record this, and we hope that all of you who may have watched this episode or listened to this episode have been moved in some way, not only in gratitude to those who do put their lives in harm's way for the sake of others, but to think about all of the ways in which the various vocations of human serving in the world are holy works. Mm-hmm. So thank you again. Thank you, those of you who have watched or listened, for the time that you've given. We'll look forward to yet the other episodes planned for this series. Thank you for being here.
I'm Megan Wyant.
I'm Fred Von Briesen.
I'm Bob Jacobs.
I'm Paul Baglios.
This has been Two Pews in a Pod, a podcast hosted by the lead pastor of Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.